So hopefully, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another scenario, and this is Ironwood, the one from the last battle that I was complaining about not working, and my nightmare with it has been continuing, but having seen it all the way through, I do hope that I can show it, because it is a very good battle and it has been updated very well, but technically I think something may have gone wrong. But nonetheless, this might be the sort of thing that never sees the light of day. I will be going through the army compositions and talking about the map first, and then seeing that that has recorded properly, and if it has, then I will continue to do the rest of the battle, but if it has not, then, you know, you will never see this, so I guess that's moot point really. But yes, Ironwood is a scenario, of course, from the last update. It worked just fine then, so I don't understand why it's such a pig to make work now. But it is, you know, you have a small settlement down here which the attackers have to attack first, and then you have this final hill position up here. Now, it used to be that you could actually circumvent the settlement entirely, and there was a small pathway that the attackers could take, but you can see that that's been changed. A large rock has been placed in the way. But other than that, the map itself is unchanged. One of the armies has changed, however. The dwarves have been replaced by Lothlorien. But we will go through the attacking armies first of all, and then we'll go through the defenders and the ins and outs of the settlement and the ways into it that the attackers could possibly take. But I will be going through the attacking army compositions quite quickly, because of course there are 5 of them, and they're all very large orc armies. So we have the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, played by Alisan. And being the Orcs of the Misty Mountains in a scenario like this, there's going to be lots of heavy goblins. There's a few heavy goblin spears, but mostly it's going to be heavy goblin infantry and goblin infantry. There are a few units of note within each army that are worth going over and bearing closer inspection. For Alisan, it's going to be the heavy goblin crossbowmen, because if they can go unnoticed and get a few good volleys into the defences, that's going to be potentially very, very effective to try and punch a hole through the defensive lines, which the sooner the attackers can do that, the sooner they will be able to overrun the settlement defence and force the defenders back to the hill. The Mountain Orc Berserkers are a decent unit as well. The heavier damage that they can inflict, the AP damage, will be good against one of the defenders in particular. You may notice the graphics are also a little bit lower. Again, that's a necessity, which I never used to have to endure, but there you go. Here we have the heavy goblin halberds as well, just another heavy goblin unit, and back here we have some of the heavy duty units as well. Mountain trolls could be good for trying to force their way through a defensive line, but Alisan, probably most significantly of all, has got the heaviest anti-cavalry presence on the field. He's got a unit of Bolg's champions and a unit of warg riders, and the defenders do have cavalry, which will be sallying out into the open field, so the wargs will be very good at hunting them down. His general's bodyguard, of course, is a unit of Goblin King's bodyguard. Moving on to Froggy's army, and again, we can see something similar here. I should go through the rules as well. The Misty Mountains army here, this Mordor army here, and the other Misty Mountains army on the far side will be able to commit everything they have all at once. And then half of the Gundabad army can also do that, and then later on in the battle, the other half of the Gundabad army and the other Mordor army will be able to commit forwards. Froggy's got a lot of fodder, and he's got some Orc maulers as well, so this is going to be his sort of first line in. Nothing too special there. He's also got some Moran on infantry, and he's got some Orc javelins, potentially good in the same way that the crossbows are. If they go unnoticed for too long, they could do some damage to the defenders. But over here we have his heavy hitters, so he's got his Minas Morgul chosen. Again, could be very good at helping to force their way through a line, because they are spears, of course, they can use their mass. His general is in this unit here, the Minas Morgul bodyguard. If we get in close, we can see some of the additional accents. They've got the eye painted onto their blackened armour, and again, similar to the Goblin King's bodyguard, he's got some troll drummers, which will be very useful to keep all of his fodder in line, and also that will spread to his ally Alisan, because they will be attacking the same portion of the settlement. And over here we also have some Sauron's Will for that extra AP damage, and just some standard Moran on guard as well. So not the best army. These two have definitely got, I think, the lowest quality in terms of overall infantry, but they do have a lot of numbers. Moving over, I think we'll go to the other army that can attack right from the off, and Starling is deployed quite a ways back and in loose formation, and obviously that's to avoid the arrow fire coming from the hill as much as he can, but he does need to commit forward quite quickly, otherwise he'll leave his allies out in the cold a little bit, and they'll be able to focus down Froggy and Alisan. But over here we do have some heavy goblin infantry, of course. Again, it's going to be quite similar, only he has got a slightly more quality infantry force than Alisan does. He's got some mountain oak blades instead of the heavy goblin infantry in some cases, and he also has some white Uruk's fearmongers as well, which in a sort of grindy choke point fight could be very useful, provided they aren't focused down by arrows. He also has snow trolls instead of the mountain trolls, which are faster and have a minus shield value as well with those small bucklers. And then back here he also has some black Uruks of the mountains, and his general is also in a Goblin King bodyguard. I think he's also got some blackback berserkers hidden around the place. Overall, his infantry is slightly better, but he doesn't have any wargs, so he is a little bit more vulnerable, perhaps, to the cavalry, and he doesn't have quite as much speed on his side. And then, of course, the other, well, we have Gundabad, played by Master Blaster, and half of his army that's going to be committed forward first is the lower tier half, which is made up, I think, entirely of Orc Halberds and Orc Marauders here at the front. So that's going to be the first wave supporting Starling. And then back here we have his elites as well, which will be coming forward, I think, 10 minutes into the battle, though with the lag, to be fair, that essentially means they'll just be following in pretty quickly, to be honest. So we have the Witch Realm Pikemen, and the Guardians of Khan Doom, the centre to any good Gundabad push. He's got some Trolls of Gundabad as well, the higher attack variant to the Trolls of Angmar, and I'm pretty sure he's got some Trolls of Angmar as well, and indeed he does, so he's got the big shields on them, and of course they are more durable but less damaging. His general, the Witch King, is in his Witch Realm Blackguard, of course a very, very strong unit, better than the Goblin King's bodyguard for instance, but then Gundabad are more heavy in terms of their infantry corps. Gundabad Guard, and actually Starling has got some Drake Brootlings over here as well, which do technically function as a fast mover, but they aren't strictly anti-cavalry. A good charge will deal with them pretty efficiently. And then the final attacking army, we have Bobo, who I think has got the most elite of all the attacking armies, but they will be committed a little later. You can tell because he's got Moran and Archers, and his units, generally speaking, have got the armour upgrade, and his basic units are the upgraded Moran on infantry and halberds, unlike Froggy, who has to make do with maulers and fodder. In here we do have a Minas Morgul bodyguard, but that's not where his general's at. That's just a unit he can use more freely. He's got some Troll Drummers as well. His general is in this unit over here, the Melkor's Chosen, another good anti-cavalry unit, but of course they are a little bit further back, so they will have a little bit more of a journey to try and intercept the defending cavalry. And then finally we have some dismounted Temple Inquisitors, of course, fearsome unit in a sustained fight. Only one of the defending units that is on the field, I think, could beat them, provided it isn't in formation, in which case it might well be two. Got some Sauron's Will as well for some extra damage, heavy maulers for more damage. I think this is, might be, well, actually no, that is a single unit of Minas Morgul Chosen. He's got some Olag high at the back, but perhaps most significantly, 2 units of the Black Legion of Barad-dûr, which will be very good at forcing their way through, and particularly late on, this could be the sort of thing which wins the match for the attackers. Now, we shall go through the defenders, starting off with the settlement, actually into the buildings as it seems. Now this settlement is rather well constructed. There are a few errors with it, but for the most part you can see here there's an archway which leads through here. That is a choke point the attackers can use. They can go through this building over here. The defenders can take shelter in this building here should they need to, and there are also several other ways in. So for example there are a few choke points over here, and there's obviously the one near the hill over there, but also if we look in closer you can go through the back gardens of these, provided there are ways in and out. So I think this area over here, with this opening here and this opening here, the attackers can go through there. Now of course they do go through the wall technically, but because there is an opening they can use that, so the defenders do need to be wary of areas that the attackers can go through. And I think they can go through this building as well, because there is a small alleyway here and they can go through there, but that does have the effect of making these buildings rather transparent, or see-through as it were. And yeah, so there are several choke points, big and small, that the defenders will have to deal with. Starting off with Arcturus playing as Cardalin. Now Cardalin are the most heavily armoured of the defenders, and there's a lot of AP on the attacking armies, but they also have the most numbers, so they should be able to hold back the attackers with some sort of gusto. They've got some Minas Tirith swordsmen at the front, with the Minas Tirith units of course making up the bulk of the Cardalin front line. They also have a good deal of elite troops, including the Wardens of Tirn Gothrad, to keep their lower tier Minas Tirith units in line and fighting with that Encourage aura. And back here we have some Minas Tirith archers. The attackers do have some form of skirmish power, not too much, but Minas Tirith archers will be able to absorb quite a lot of the lower tier goblin firepower. Over here we've got some Dunedain captains with the armour upgrade, another unit of Wardens of Tirn Gothrad back there, and over here we have some more Minas Tirith units, another unit of Dunedain captains, so 2 of them on display. Some more Minas Tirith swordsmen, also some spears to help hold the line together with their mass, so the goblins can't just push through. A very deadly unit here of Tharbad Warhammers, and with multiple HP and AP, they're going to be able to do a lot of damage to the Goblin and Orc hordes. The General's bodyguard over here, well the General here is in a unit of Hearthguard of Amon Sul. As it stands, the most tanky archer in the game. You know, they are certainly very difficult to take down. Not the most damaging, particularly next to their 2 Elven allies, but they should still be able to do a pretty decent amount of damage. There's also some Dunedain Rangers hidden around here somewhere. That's Lothlorien, but yes, there are some Dunedain Rangers hidden around here somewhere, which again should be able to do a huge amount of damage with their body piercing. A Trebuchet as well, to help force the blob forward more quickly maybe than they'd like. And then we have the Crossbow Corps, the upgraded Minotaur Romen Guardians. Very good at dealing with mounted units as well, so if the wargs should get in behind the line, they'll be easily gunned down, or pulled off their mounts with those billhooks there, and then the Miniskirthan sharpshooters, which double as mace men in melee. Very good. Cardlan's crossbows are really the centre of what makes their faction a very potent force. Then we have some Miniskirthan archers, and then finally over here we have some Greenwatch garrison footmen, some more spears, and then over here I'm a little bit confused as to why people keep insisting on using the Arthurdane units in Cardland, but we do have the Royal Courthouse Armlaith. I'm not sure why they wouldn't use the Royal Courthouse Thorondor with the armour upgrade, to be honest with you. It's a minor complaint, but, you know, it's still a holdover from when Eriador could gain access to Arnor's units, and I'm not really the biggest fan of seeing them here, but nonetheless, they are here, and they are multiple HP Lancers, so they should do a good job. Then we come into Lothlorien, the replacement for the dwarves. We have Goddess Nimhain, or Outfit, as he is known on the Discord. So he's got some Lothlorien blades and some Lothlorien warriors, so some AP and some highly skill-based infantry. The Lothlorien blade's going to be very difficult for the orcs to deal with. There's also a catapult here, pointing in the direction of the defence they need to mount. And then the best unit that Lothlorien have on the field, really, in many ways, is the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians, because the front line that they can form is going to be extremely powerful. The only multiple HP pikemen in the game. That makes them the best, of course. There are 2 units of them on display here as well, both backed up by a unit of Lothlorien spears. Very, very potent front line. They could be pushed out of the way maybe by trolls in a sort of focused mass push, but it's gonna do a lot of damage to the orcs as they do that. And this is the other one with stakes in the front as well to make sure the Melkor's Chosen can't just charge into the front of them. Although why they do that with the pikes there, I don't quite know. Anyway, back here we have the Lothlorien Swordmasters. Again, sort of the equivalent to the Lothlorien Warriors, only they have swords and have better stats overall, I think, but they don't have the AP. Lothlorien Axes as well, sort of the antithesis to the Lothlorien Blades. They have a little bit more damage, but that comes at the cost of their survivability. So we move back for more Swordmasters and more Warriors. And then over here we have the very scary Galathrim Nobles. They are fantastic in melee, but they are also, of course, I think, the most potent archer Lothlorien can field in their incandescent golden armour. Back here we've got a couple of units of Lothlorien archers as well, and then Haldir is actually in the Sindar archers, which again I think they're not quite as good as the Galathrim nobles overall, but ultimately they are still both multiple HP elven archers, which are going to do a lot of damage. Not AP, but still very powerful. Then the final army, the one I'm watching the replay from the perspective of, we have Engsfitz, who's playing as the Realm of Mirkwood. We've got some Aya Abranon Inanwaith, which are not actually the General's Bodyguard, but they are still a multiple HP spear cavalry here. And they should be able to do a decent amount of damage as long as they stay away from the wargs. And also, Mirkwood's cavalry is very vulnerable to archers, I've noticed. Even this multiple HP variant will get burned down pretty quickly, even faster than wargs, I've noticed, which is rather unfortunate for them. But they also do have some Dagnirim Ik Erin, which are the horse archers, and they could be pretty good as long as they can buzz the enemy lines appropriately and avoid the enemy skirmishers, who are obviously going to try and zone them out. It's good actually that I'm watching it from the perspective of Mirkwood this time, because in the failed recording I watched it from the perspective of Cardolan, and I couldn't actually see a lot of Mirkwood's units initially because a lot of them are hidden. But at the front here we have the very much visible Here Eak, 3 units of them, very strong spearmen, similar to the Lothlorien spears of course. And then back here we also have some Here Lang, which are going to be the swordsmen, and then we have some Megal Erin and the Thandrim Erin. Of course, basic spears and infantry units can be used more freely. Some Hethel Tower, which are they aren't an assassin unit, they are a shock unit, they just wield dual axes, and again, just an interesting unit to see on the field. The assassin unit is here, however. They have the Gwath Erin Gallen, which wield dual daggers and have throwing knives as well. Very similar in many ways to the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, the Brotherhood Shadowblades, and the Thieves of Tharbad, only the difference being, I believe they aren't quite as good in melee as the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen, but they are cheaper as a result, which is not often the sort of language you hear when talking about the elves. Some Thurny Tower, which I believe are a ranger unit. They're a very powerful unit, and in the next hotfix they will be being made a little bit cheaper so that they can be utilised a little bit more effectively, because Mirkwood at the moment are pretty difficult to play, but satisfying. Unit of Hirti Peng over here, so the more resilient archer unit. And then as we sort of move up the hill, we start to get into here are the 2 very powerful foot-based units of Mirkwood. We have the Ir Athalion Inanwaith, which are of course the Elder Palace Guard. They are the unit which I would say would go 1-to-1 with the dismounted Temple Inquisitors. The Karas Kaladhon Guardians could do it as well, provided the Temple Inquisitors charged right front on into their formation, sort of 1-to-1, but it's unlikely to happen in this situation with so many men on the field. And then we have the Ir Agwe Inanwaith, which are, of course, this is where Thranduil's hanging out, which is the best of the Mirkwood archer lines, and that's a pretty hefty distinction, all things considered. And then at the top here we have a couple of units of Hirti Peng. Now, That is the army compositions. Now I hope that this will see the light of day and that this is something which people are actually listening to at the moment, because that means we will be about to get into the battle. I will make a little cut because there is a little bit of manoeuvring at the start. The attackers start quite a ways away, but it shouldn't be too long because the defensive cavalry will be moving out to meet them and do a bit of skirmishing. So, I shall see you on the battlefield, I hope. Well, by the looks of things, it looks as though the Royal Court of House Armlaith is going to make the first move in this fight, and interestingly enough, they're going for Alisand's army, the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, and it also looks like they're making a beeline for the Heavy Goblin Spears. Now, I'll just turn the speed down a little bit so we can get a little bit better of a charge view here. But the Heavy Goblin Spears, honestly, the Lancers will do some damage off the charge, so some of these Heavy Goblin Spears will fall to the Lancers, but there are a few things to note here. One is that the Royal Corps are in somewhat of a column formation, so they're not getting a lot of surface area off their charge. They won't do as much damage as they otherwise would. And also, Spears are going to resist the cavalry charge a little bit more because they have more mass, obviously, so their formation's not going to buckle quite so easily. And when their attacks start to land, like now, you can see that already the Royal Court of House Armlaith, a very elite unit, is starting to waver under the arrow fire, under the trolls coming towards them, and also the armour-piercing damage of the Heavy Goblin Spears. And they are shaken, and in fact, when the trolls get there, they might break. They're already wavering, and you can see that you do have to force path your units away, otherwise they will start to rubber band and come back to the units. And the Royal Court of House Armlaith already routing, so maybe a little bit reckless there from Arcturus with his high-tier Lancers. Obviously, I do apologise again. When we get away from the action, the sprites will come into view a little bit faster because of the level of graphics I'm being forced to use for this fight. But the goblins are cresting the hill and they are moving towards the settlement with a lot of urgency, which is good to see. Meanwhile, we'll go back up to 1 speed as we can see that the other cavalry contingent from Engsfitz, the Mirkwood Cavalry, is also on the move. And it'll be interesting to see how these are used, because the wargs actually were never needed to be used against the Royal Court of House Armlaith before they routed. Now, they might come back, and indeed I think they have indeed. So they've come back already, but they do need to get away from the Misty Mountains army, otherwise the wargs, like the Bolgs champions, will hunt them down pretty mercilessly. But if we look over here, the Dagnirim are over here. Actually, we'll just get back over here to see a charge coming in from the Armlaith cavalry. And the Goblin Infantry, Heavy Goblin Infantry, are much better targets, but they are in loose formation, so they won't take quite as many losses, and the Bolgs champions have caught them. So not great news there for the Armlaith cavalry. They will probably be routed off again, and that might be it for them. If not, then they'll take enough damage to make them much less effective than they otherwise were. Now, the Dagnirim Ik Erin are going to be firing into the Warg Riders, and the Warg Riders don't have a lot of ammunition. Having said that, the Wargs are still pretty resilient to arrows because they have multiple HP. Which means while the HP is still up, they will be able to take a lot more fire. Now, some of them are falling, but you'll notice they're not dropping extremely quickly. But now the hit points are starting to be peeled off, they are starting to drop off with a little bit more consistency. But there are these Minas-Girthan swordsmen over here, and the wargs will probably charge into them. And the wargs are AP in melee, but that is something they will be losing over the next hotfix, because wargs are a little bit too easy and too forgiving to use at the moment. They have a lot of margin for error in their use, but this is a situation in which they won't do too well because they are wavering and they're going to take a rear charge from the Abranon Inanwe, which of course means they're going to rouse off pretty quickly. There's no units to support them, and Orc morale is pretty damn low at the best of times. So that's 1 unit of Warg Riders gone for the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, but considering they've essentially traded it for the Armlaith Cavalry more or less, that's a pretty worthwhile trade to have, denying the defenders their ability, at least some of their ability, to come out and deal damage on the outside of the settlement. It means they're going to be bottled up a little bit more, at least on this front, because it looks as though the Mirkwood Cavalry is going to be shifting over and heading towards Starling's army, which is a little bit further back. Also, I don't think Starling has got much in the way of crossbows, but he does have some Mountaineeric archers. With their 10 missile damage, they'll be able to do a lot of damage to these lightly armoured Mirkwood cavalry units, even the Abranon Inanwaith with their 2 hit points. Meanwhile, I'm just going to turn it down a little bit and get into the meat and bones of this fight, because Alisand's army is already attacking the settlement, which is good to see a bit of aggression. He is going to need to receive some pretty swift reinforcements. So, I mean, the Nanwaith are here, but it's not really going to be the best charge that they're going to get on the Heavy Goblin Infantry, and also the possibility of trapping them and bringing a few of them down is always going to be a worthwhile investment. He is going to need some reinforcements from Froggy's army pretty quickly, but Froggy's sending up his fodder pretty fast as well. So they're going to be attacking this settlement pretty quickly. Now, they're not going to be able to get through Cardland too fast, and they are going to need the allies of Gundabad and Misty Mountains on the other side to pressure Lothlorien, otherwise there is a chance they could be focused down. But being aggressive is the name of the game here, and they certainly have men to spare, they've got a huge numbers advantage over the defenders. And over here you can see another front line has opened up. The Miniscirithlin spearmen and the Greenwatch garrison footmen forming up the front line. Spears providing the mass. The pikes providing the range so that they can start to take out some of these very lightly armoured goblin troops. And there's a lot of arrow fire coming in, of course. You can see there's a huge firing battery over here. There's the trebuchet, a couple of units of Lothlorien archers, and there's also some Miniscirithlin sharpshooters. And I think there's, yeah, some Miniscirithlin archers as well. So they've got a lot of arrow fire coming in on this blob, which is understandable, because they could pretty quickly rout off these goblins if they don't receive reinforcements quickly. But the heavy goblin spears could be just the thing to crack through the lines here if they could push through. The Miniscirithlin spears will be able to counteract them somewhat, but they will need some more reinforcements to help hold the line, but some Miniscirithlin swordsmen and some Tharbad warhammers are on the way over. Also over here you can see the Wardens of Tirn Gothrad forming the anchor of this line over here. Interesting times, there's actually some trolls coming over, but just for the moment we'll just have a quick look at what's going on with the Dagnirim. The Mirkwood horse archers, and it looks like they're trying to sort of skirmish down these. Well, actually no, they're going for something else. They're going for the Mountain Uruk archers, not a fight the Dagnirim want to be in. The Mountain Uruk archers, of course, have got huge missile damage. They're definitely not a standard unit, and they're going to tear through a unit like the Dagnirim. They need to get out of there quickly, and so does the other unit actually, because the snow trolls are going to come in, and they are going to make their presence felt with melee. The snow trolls are going to be able to smash these horse archers into the dirt. Look at this guy with their pickaxes and their bucklers, getting a nice charge off, just cleaving through them, and they need to get out of there. These horse archers need to retreat. Not really the best army for them to go after. The Abranon are coming over here, but it might be a little late. Meanwhile, let's go and have a look. Again, I'm just going to keep it on slow motion while we're having a look at the close-ups of this fight, because otherwise it may very well... the frame rate won't be too great if I don't. So we'll have a look at these mountain trolls, and they're coming in, and the trolls being committed this early is a bit of a gamble. They should be able to sort of slowly but surely pick their way through this line with the Wardens of Tirn Gothrad and the spearmen, but just in behind them there's another unit of Miniscirithlin swordsmen, which is another line they're going to have to try and force their way through. You can see they are actually getting into the buildings over here. But there's so much in reserve over here, including 2 units of Dunedain captains. I think this is a little bit early to commit the trolls. But having said that, the trolls could be just the thing to get into that very strong point of skirmishers from both Lothlorien and Cardland back there. So that might be the reason for Alisand's haste, because something like the Dunedain Rangers back there could be an extremely powerful tool. You know, in this sort of situation I would expect the Dunedain Rangers to pretty comfortably get in excess of 1,000 kills based on the body piercing and the amount of low tier units they're getting through. Trolls, however, are pretty good against pikes, as we've seen. The Wardens of Tirn Gothrad are not going to be sufficient to deal with the trolls here. But these Miniscirithlin swordsmen are now going to be committed as well to make, you know, more bodies for the trolls to try and force their way through. And as the trolls are doing damage as well, they're also going to be making a little bit of a gap for these goblin infantrymen to worm their way in and try and do a bit more damage back there. Interesting to see what's going on out here. Looks like some Moranon infantry. You can see the trebuchets firing in, just narrowly missing those orc fodder. But I think now we can pretty safely go up to 1 speed and have a look at what's going on with the Mirkwood cavalry. Now the Dagnirim are still being mercilessly pursued by the snow trolls, and not a single snow troll has fallen. Actually, the Royal Court of House Armlaith is still alive. That's pretty impressive, all things considered, the amount of punishment they've taken at this point. But the Abranon are coming in as well. Now, this is the sort of fight that I would definitely not be committing my Mirkwood cavalry to, because, you know, the Mountain Uruk archers are going to be so good against the Mirkwood cavalry here. The Nanwaith are trying to get some nice charges off, but ultimately it's only really goblin infantry that they're cleaving their way through. And as soon as they come up against a unit of genuine quality, things are going to go downhill pretty quickly. What are the cavalry from Armlaith doing? They're going to charge in again, but once again it looks like they've been a little bit too gung-ho, because the Bolgs champions are right here, and it looks like they're going to finish what they started. Needless to say, the Bolgs champions, especially when the Royal Court don't get a charge off, the Bolgs champions, when they're backed up by infantry as well. Yeah, maybe not the best start for the defenders here. I mean, their front line is being pressured pretty heavily by trolls. And indeed, it looks like the trolls have managed to get through somewhat over here. Let's get in a little closer. See, a lot of the trolls did die, to be fair. There's only, what, 8 of them left, but they did manage to get through the lines, so they managed to crack through. Having said that, this front line over here is still looking relatively solid. They've still got most of the Wardens of Tirn Gothrad intact, which is the real anchor to this line, and they're going to be able to hold back a lot of heavy goblin infantry all day long, provided they're backed up. And the morale buffs they provide are also going to be pretty significant. And we have a look over here, we can see some of the snow trolls trying to recharge this line over here, trying to break through. However, this is also not a fight the Trolls will particularly like, because the Tharbad Warhammers are in here, and the high damage and multiple HP of the Warhammers should be enough to bring down what's left of the Trolls after all the damage they took trying to pull through those lines. But it's a bit more of an even trade over here. I mean, you can see over there that the Dunedain Ranger fire coming in there, I believe that was, based on the sound effect I was hearing. Or at least Elven arrows. The Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen are back there though as well, and the Heavy Goblin Archers, so it's not only the defenders that are having some skirmish over here. And indeed the Tharbad Warhammers are a pretty worthy target for the attackers to go after with their skirmishes, in particular their crossbows. Multiple HP shock troops, very, very deadly. See some Lothlorien warriors are also coming over here now, so I think they can see that this line may need a little bit of bolstering in the future, and a unit of Wardens of Tir Gothrad and Lothlorien warriors will really shore up this line for a pretty significant amount of time. And this is where the other armies over here need to start to move a little bit faster, in my opinion, because they need to back up their allies, because they're starting to take a beating on the other side, the attackers, because all of the skirmishers are able to focus their fire into huge blobs and get a lot of value for money. Whereas over here you can see what's left of the Abranon. They came over here, they were very, very bold, but only 4 of them now remain. And the Mirkwood Cavalry's stats are very good, but their armour is very low, and they don't have shields either, so they are very easy to focus down with skirmish fire, especially with very strong skirmishers like the Mountain Uruk Archers and what's left of the Dagner. And there's still 37 of them, but in melee against Snow Trolls they are going to not stand much of a chance at all. But yes, both Gundabad and the Misty Mountains army under the command of Starling need to attack the settlement from this angle as well. It's not the most appealing avenue of attack, particularly with those Mirkwood skirmishers up on the cliff over there, but it's kind of a necessity to come over here and attack, because otherwise the defenders are able to focus down individual choke points, whereas the real challenge for the defenders with Ironwood is covering every angle that the attackers can attack the settlement through. The defenders do have a number of things that they can use to their advantage, such as the narrowness of some of the choke points, and in particular the hill position up there for these choke points, but ultimately there are a lot of choke points, and particularly with the amount of numbers that the attackers have, they can definitely attack every choke point at once, and somewhere the defenders are going to be weak. And as soon as one choke point starts to crumble, the attackers will be able to flood into this settlement and start to bring it down. Oh dear. Gonna need to go down to half speed again, I feel, to get in close to this fight. I wish I could have the graphics a little higher, but alas. Some of these Heavy Goblin Spears actually did manage to push their way through the flank, but unfortunately for Alasan, in a similar vein to his Trolls, as soon as they did, they've taken such a beating that it looks like they're going to actually break off immediately as soon as they get through. There is a gap in this line now that something else could follow up through with, and he's got some Goblin Infantry, but again, Goblin Infantry is not really the sort of thing that's going to be able to make an advanced stick. But they need to do something over here, because Alasan's army is taking a real hammering from these skirmishers, the crossbows, the elven archers, the human archers, the rangers. That's pretty much every kind of deadly skirmisher except javelins that's being poured into Alasan's army over here. But none of Alasan's truly elite units have been up here yet, so maybe they could view it as wasting the defenders' ammunition. These Heavy Goblin Spears are going to rout off pretty quickly, I would imagine, to these Wardens of Tir Gothrad. Or are they? Well, I mean, the attacking archers are also trying to focus down the Minas Girithlan archers, which are probably the worst target because they are the lowest damage. Well, the rangers technically have lower damage, but the body piercing makes it much higher in practice. But they are the lowest damage, and also probably the toughest with their armour, other than maybe the sharpshooters. You can see here that the Heavy Goblin Spears are wavering, starting to take losses. They will rout off. Meanwhile, over here you can see that Froggy's Orc Maulers have come forward, but again, Maulers are the sort of thing which will be even less efficient at dealing with arrows than these low-tier Heavy Goblin Infantrymen. And you can actually see that these Lothlorien warriors are starting to force their way to the front of the line to get their armour piercing into action. And also the Orc Maulers will be a little less efficient against them than they would be against the Cardolan Infantry. Meanwhile, you can see the Dagnerim retreating backwards. Starling is moving forward with his Mountain Oak Blades. The armies are just sort of cresting the hill now. You can see the Froggies also coming through here. And over here you can see one of the small choke points in effect. The defenders actually didn't defend this outer area here, so we didn't actually get to see fighting in these buildings over here. But this is how it would work if someone else wanted to play this scenario for themselves. So the buildings are being used by Froggy to advance. Let's just sort of look from on high for the time being. You can see that only one unit of Orc Maulers has been committed over here, so they're going to need more. Otherwise, this attack could fall apart. And This is the other end of the spectrum. If one of the attacks on one of the choke points starts to fall apart, that's going to free up a lot of defending infantry to go and defend other choke points, and this is why Gundabad and Starling need to get their hustle on, because they really need to be pressuring all the choke points at once. Because you can now see over here that the Trebuchet is starting to focus down this choke point over here, and now Froggy's infantry is starting to feel some of the pain as well. So this has definitely been a good source, well, a good choke point so far for the defenders. They've managed to deal with an awful lot of the attacking infantry from Alasan at any rate. Most of it was lower tier, but even so, I mean, evening out those numbers is what it's all about at this point. You can see over here that this choke point is now being defended by the Karas Galadhon's Guardians and the Lothlorien Spears, so it doesn't get any easier for the defenders, well, the attackers I should say, over here. But I still think these armies are lagging a little bit further behind, and I think this is the downside to Starling deploying a little bit further back. Yes, he took less damage from the archers on the approach, but ultimately this has just led to his allies taking more of the brunt of the skirmish fire. If they'd managed to stretch the skirmish fire of the defenders out between the choke points, rather than allowing them to really focus down this one over here, things might have gone a little bit better for them. But again, we can't deal in what-ifs. Meanwhile, the Wards of Tirngothrad over here is still relatively healthy. I mean, 94 men in the unit still. But again, it was mostly heavy goblin infantry. It was only really the trolls that were able to do a lot of damage to them. There are also some White Uruks Fearmongers from Starling over here, and they should be able to do a much better job against these Cardlin infantry with their AP. And they are also being backed up by some Moranon infantry from Froggy, just standard without the armour upgrade. But that should be decent enough to start doing some damage. Also some Orc Maulers, so there's a lot of AP on this front line now. And they will need some... They do need to start to do some damage to one of these choke points, the attackers, otherwise they might start to get away from them a little bit. Again, as soon as one of these choke points falls though, the defenders in the settlement will have to fall back to the hill. That's how Ironwood is crafted, and I do like the way it's made like that. If the defenders don't commit to defending every choke point, they will be overrun unless they move back to the hill, and of course you're not going to make many friends if you retreat to the hill immediately. You can see some Orc fodder moving forward as well. Ooh. Some Dunedain captains over there. The Minotaur Romen Guardians with their crossbows. Very, very good unit. Probably my favourite Cardlin unit overall, because their ability to just be a menace to cavalry in an open field is so strong. Obviously not as relevant here, but their armour-piercing missiles are still going to be a great help. And also in melee, they're not half bad in this situation either. You see these Dag Nirim are coming over here now, and you can see that actually going through some of the buildings here. But the Dag Nirim coming out from the inn, the Orcs, after ransacking the ale. The Dunedain captains are prepared to meet them in melee, however. The Dunedain captains with the armour upgrade look so cool. And needless to say, they will hack their way through Moranon infantry all day long. But again, it's wave after wave of Orc pressure, and you can see coming through the alleyway, the Moranon infantry, another unit of them. And they're starting to surround this choke point over here, which could be their way forwards. The Miniskirithan archers that are out of ammunition are moving into melee to meet the challenge of the Moranon infantry and to try and sort of keep this choke point alive. Because again, if they lose this choke point now, that would be very bad for them. But some Lothlorien archers that are out of ammunition and some more Miniskirithan swordsmen are over here to shore up that line, and that's good to see. Oh, we should go over here because Starling has now begun his assault on this side of things. And you can actually see he's actually tried to bring his snow trolls forward, and they've just been stopped in their tracks, trying to smash through the line, which is a worthwhile tactic against a pike unit as strong as the Karas Galadhon's Guardians. But ultimately the snow trolls not able to get through the mass that the Lothlorien Spears, Swordmasters and Sindar Blade Masters are providing. Now, the Elves don't have as high a mass as most other factions. They've got less men in the unit overall. But in this situation, they've committed enough men to stop the snow trolls. And that is, I believe, the Trebuchet. Now, there's some friendly fire there, which is unfortunate, but most of that was very nice hits on Goblin Infantry and Heavy Goblin Infantry. And I think that is the Trebuchet. No, it's actually the Catapult. The Catapult getting some nice hits there. And I think that's it for the Trolls, actually. The Trolls have all fallen. And now, without the Trolls on the front line, the lower tier Goblins are going to start to rout off. So I see what Starling was trying to do there. He was trying to force his way through with his Trolls, maybe get in behind them and start to crumble the line then. But unfortunately for him, the Trolls were stopped, and this has led to his lower tier infantry starting to break. He's got another unit of Goblin infantry ready to just move forward though, and again, there's going to be a wave by wave assault here. Meanwhile, having a look over here, Starling's also got some Mountaineeric Blades. Alisand's got his Bolgs Champions. They're getting ready to attack this choke point as well, with the Karas-Galadhon's Guardians once more defending it. So again, it's going to be an attack on all sides. Have a look over here though, the Morannon infantry. They tried to attack the rear of the choke point, but ultimately the defenders had enough in reserve to halt that advance. A lot of the Minas Tirith units, as well as some Lothlorien units, and then the Dunedain captains, the Morannon infantry is going to do next to no damage to them at all. There's still quite a lot of men over here though. Some Morannon halberds as well as some fodder. The Fearmongers on the front line, there's still 94 of them, and it looks like they've started to do a lot more damage. They've killed some more wardens, but in particular the spears are starting to get shaken, they're exhausted. And then if we have a look over here, what is happening? Looks like more of Alisand's forces, and unfortunately for him it looks like he's being forced to commit forward his skirmishers that are out of ammunition at this point. What else has got going on over here? He's got his Goblin King bodyguard though, which will be able to shore up this front line and encourage the men around them to stay in the fight for a little while longer. But you can see just Cardland and Lothlorien relentlessly pushing forward, cleaving through these goblins, the Wardens of Tir Ngothrad and the Lothlorien Blades. The goblins really don't stand a chance against that. But there are units in reserve, so there's Orc Maulers. They will be able to sustain the fight on this front, which is really all they can hope for at this point. They really don't want this defence to fall apart. They've already got some units in reserve over here, because elsewhere they are having slightly more luck. I mean, they're having a little bit more of a concerted push over here. The Fearmongers are starting to do some damage over there. And actually you can see over here, Starling saw the gap. You're able to go through this garden over here. It might look like you can go through the buildings entirely, but you can only go through, there's a pathway here. And the Mountaineeric Blades, finding their way in behind, and fortunately, Goddess Nimhe, or Outfit, sees this very quickly, and he's going to swamp them with Lothlorien axes and Swordmasters, and of course the Mountaineeric Blades are going to very quickly find themselves outclassed. Also some Sindar Blade Masters, which might be a bit overkill, and what's left of the Dag Nirim will probably charge them as well. But this is another choke point they're going to have to hold. And you can see over here that Starling is continuing to send units forward, and also Master Blaster is sending forward some units of his own, some Orc Fallers and some Halberds. That, I believe, is Alisand's general. So the Goblin King bodyguard, while it was committed over there, it did cost Alisand his general, which will probably be bad for his overall morale. Again, it's not a hugely significant thing. It's not like Warhammer where it confers a massive penalty. But it certainly won't help matters with his goblins and keeping them in line. So there's some Orc Halberds over here, so Master Blaster's lower tier units are coming forward to form a line of fodder, which will help Starling. But this is probably their best bet of getting into the settlement at this point. I mean, the Bolgs Champions would be not a bad choice to send through here, but it looks like the Legion of Trolls is coming forward now. The Trolls of Gundabad and the Trolls of Angmar. Where are they? Maybe the Trolls of Angmar are going to go first. That wouldn't be the worst idea. They've got higher melee defense and they've got that big old shield. And then the Trolls of Gundabad with a little bit more of an attack value. The Trolls of Angmar, they use the Orcish shield model from Skyrim, only it's a little bit more 2D and it doesn't have that horn that juts out on the front. But the Trolls are going to come in here, and once again, in a similar vein to what Starling tried to do with his Snow Trolls, only with 2 units of Trolls, Master Blaster is going to try and get through the Karas-Galadhon's Guardians. See, the Trolls are just crashing into this line, but again, the presence of the spears helps them a great deal. And now the Megal y Erin are also coming in, also to try and add a little bit more mass. What's left of the Dag Nirim comes in. Now the Trolls need some infantry support very quickly, and it does look like Master Blaster is going to be sending up some Halberds and Marauders to try and provide that. They have managed to get in here, and they will do some damage to the Trolls, but it doesn't look like they're going to be able to smash through the line, which is what Master Blaster was obviously hoping to do. The catapult was in a prime position to be attacked there, although they are being sprayed down by arrows as it is, but it looks like the catapult's going to get away. But once again, the push with Trolls. Trolls are very good at this, but when there's enough men around, they will be stopped in their tracks, isolated and ultimately killed, especially when they're surrounded by Elven units like this. Because even the Megal y Erin are capable of dishing out a pretty substantial amount of punishment over a period of time. Now the Orcs are coming in to support the Trolls, but already it looks as though the Trolls are starting to burn out. They've managed to kill a couple of Karas-Galadhon's Guardians, but that's about all they have to show for their efforts, which is unfortunate. That is a river of Orcs coming forward from Gundabad, however. So they are now starting to pressure every flank, and this is what the attackers needed to do earlier, I think. But as it stands, they are now doing so. And eventually there's going to be a crack in the defenders' lines, and they are going to need to... Well, it looks like the Bolgs Champions did indeed find the gap around. They went with Starling, and they are now charging into the Galathram Nobles. They do have hit points. They were able to kind of resist that charge, and now they need to get out of there, otherwise they will start to be shot down. The Bolgs Champions looks like they're going to go for the Dag Nirim. starting to fall away though under that arrow fire. Again, could have been a better charge against the Galathram nobles, but understandable why it wasn't. That was a trebuchet shot. What is going on over there? That was a really big shot over there, but it looks like it killed some Kairos Galadhon's guardians as well. It did. And again, that sort of friendly fire is not what they can afford. It's not really the best angle for the trebuchet, but that was a nice hit. And now a ton of orcs are starting to rout because it's all lower tier units. There's nothing in there to keep them in line. And that is one of the real downsides to being an orc faction. It means they are now going to start to rout. They will come back, but they will be tired and shaken when they come back. So a lot of their effectiveness will have been bled dry. Let's go back up to 1 speed, I think, as things are starting to kick off. We'll have to look at things from on high to really get a good view of everything as it happens. These Bolg champions are going to get a nice charge into the Dunedain Rangers, which at this point have probably got a ton of kills. But they did take a charge from the Bolg champions, and a ton of them died. The Rangers are very fragile to charges and to skirmish fire. They've got a decent amount of melee skill, but other than that, not a great deal. Looks like the Bolg champions are going to be surrounded and finished off at this point. They did get a rear charge into the Megal E. Erin. Actually, Alisand managed to get them out of there. That's not too shabby. But again, they're going to go into Dunedain captains. They're getting some decent charges as they sort of cycle around here, which is good to see. Meanwhile, if we have a look over here, still some Minas Tirith archers and Lothlorien archers starting to push back the attackers over there. Frame rate starting to go down a little bit over there, but the White Uruks Fearmongers are on the front line still. There's still some scouts as well from Froggy, and lower tier archers can be used to pretty good effect in this situation. There's also some Mountain Orc Berserkers which are starting to take some crossbow fire, so they need to be careful. Again, they might be armor-piercing missiles intended for different targets, but the Mountain Orc Berserkers will still die just like anyone else to a crossbow volley. And you can actually see over here that the Minas Tirith Spearmen and what's left of the Wardens of Tir Gothrad over here, actually there's still 102 of them, never mind. They managed to mulch their way through those archers very quickly. But Froggy's still got units that you can send in over here, and again I think that the plan is just to keep this defensive choke point busy and try and push in on other flanks. This front is still going, but I think the defenders are starting to realise maybe over here is their best bet.
Badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
Although having said that, over here, probably not the best avenue of attack here, because now not only do they have to deal with Lothlorien units, but there's also a unit of the sharpshooters that are out of ammunition, and they are makeshift macemen in melee, so now they're having to go through armor-piercing damage as well as pikes and Lothlorien spears. And again, all of these lower-tier Gundabad units are not going to be sufficient for hacking and slashing their way through here, I fear. Oop. Meanwhile, if we go and have a look over here, we see those Lothlorien archers up on the hill getting a perfect angle into the back of these Guardians of Khan Doom, so Master Blast is starting to send forward some more serious units through here, as well as some Witch Realm Scourge Raiders and Pikemen. So there will be some more damage being done to Lothlorien now that the more elite units are being sent forward. Meanwhile, there's still a big old blob over here. There's Witch Realm Scourge Raiders here as well, so Master Blaster is making up the majority of the front line over here at this point. There's also some Witch Realm Blackguard taking cover behind that building. I don't think this alleyway is actually available to come through, so they're just trying to take cover from the skirmishers. You can actually see up on the hill there the Hir E Peng, who again are another unit that have presumably got a lot of kills at this point. See them get a nice volley off into the backs of a lot of these Gundabad forces. Surprised to not see more fire arrows from the defenders, if I'm honest, unless there was an agreement not to use them, because they are a little bit balked at the moment. The hotfix will be fixing that. But yeah, they're just firing into the blob, getting a ton of kills. They're not body piercing, because they are a little bit more resilient. Very much the black sheep of the Mirkwood skirmishers in many ways. A lot of the Mirkwood skirmishers are all about being lightly armoured and doing a lot of damage. The Hir E Peng still do a lot of damage, but they are more resilient than their peers. Speaking of resilient, you can see the Golden Galathram nobles still doing a lot of damage. And there's some Lothlorien blades over here that they've got in reserve. The trebuchet's moving perhaps to get a better shot down this alley here, which the Gundabad orcs still driving themselves forward. There's some Olag High back there, so Bobo's army's starting to come into play now. And this is where I would expect the defenders to start to struggle on some fronts. Let's go back up to 1 speed, but we're not even halfway through yet. Liberal use of half speed, it must be said. There's some Melkor's Chosen back there. Definitely not the kind of unit you want to be seeing.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
Indeed. Lothlorien archers presumably out of ammunition, Lothlorien blades. Oh, that is nasty. That's going to send a lot of the Gundabad orcs wavering once again. I mean, I do admire Gundabad here because they definitely took it upon themselves to be the first ones over on this front to really commit most of their stuff. but they've also been made to pay pretty horribly for that. There's also some Olag High over there, and the Olag High, one of them gets hit by the trebuchet, and that immediately causes them to retreat, and there's a lot of these units on the front line which started to rout off as a result of that. Some Black Uruks back there from Starling. Now this could be an interesting play from Bobo, so now he's trying to get through with his Melkor's Chosen. Them running around the back lines could be the sort of thing to start to make the defenders worry a little bit, because the Melkor's Chosen should be able to push their way through this front line. It's only a thin line of Elven units after all. The Melkor's Chosen are pretty heavy duty, and indeed they do get through. Can they push their way through? The Lothlorien Blades and the Sindar Archers also come through, and it looks like they will. So the Melkor's Chosen managed to get through that. They are, I think, at the moment, the toughest of the quote-unquote warg units. I know they're Caragors, but they're basically just wargs on steroids, let's be honest. They did take damage from that, though, and you can see that the volleys from the Galathram Nobles starting to cause some of them to drop. But they are in behind the lines now, which will worry the defenders a little bit. You can see that Starling's sending forward some of his Black Uruks to help the ailing assault from Gundabad, which they need badly at this point. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul. The Melkor's Chosen avoiding them, which is probably wise considering their spears in melee. They're still taking damage from those arrows from the Galathram Nobles. They're going to go into the Trebuchet. Honestly, at this point, the Trebuchet's probably done damage to be sufficient. Oh, over here, you can see that the Drake Broodlings are able to get in behind the line, so they presumably pushed their way through over here. But as soon as they got through, unfortunately, they started to run amok. But running amok is fine in this situation, probably, because they're still going to be doing damage to the Minas Tirith Archers and the Lothlorien Archers, and they managed to get through, which is the important thing. You can also see in the background over there the Troll Drummers keeping the front line in check, the one that was at most at risk of dying. And the Melkor's Chosen starting to fire in, so now the attackers are starting to see a shift in the tide of this battle, I would say. Because up till now the defenders have had it all their own way. But now there's going to be a little bit of a worry for the defenders. They're starting to take damage on fronts, and as soon as one of these front lines falls, they're going to be forced to retreat back to the Mirkwood position over there. A lot of the Mirkwood units are still at the back. It's only the two basic units of Megil e Erin and the Mirkwood Cavalry that was committed. So Mirkwood still has the majority of their army. I think it's going to come down to what Lothlorien and Cardland can save when the choke points inevitably break. So if we have a look at the percentages of kills, just over 20%, so 22% there. And that's the sort of gap that the attackers can very easily close, especially considering some of the units they still have available to them, like the Black Legion, like the dismounted Temple Inquisitors, and they still have those Mountain Uruk Archers, which can put a lot of pressure onto the defences in the late game. Meanwhile, if we have a look over here, you can see the Black Uruks of the mountains fighting hard on the front line. Again, they do, every time I look at the Black Uruks, they tend to have defeat seems certain over them, but they are a very good unit, to be fair. They're able to confer a lot more damage than a lot of the other Misty Mountains units, which you often see in a situation like this. But Gundabad units have been really heavily damaged. The Karas Kaladhon's Guardians have shifted their focus over here. So this choke point is actually a little bit more vulnerable now, and actually Starling is going to try and get some battered units of heavy Goblin infantry up and around the flank, maybe his Goblin King bodyguard as well, which will confer a bit of a HP bonus. You can see over here the Melkor's Chosen just charging around, trying to get some kills in the back lines. It might be worthwhile to try and recharge one of the defences that's ailing a little bit. What's going on over there? Sauron's Will. Looks like Froggy's sending forward his elites. So I'm just going to... Once again, we're going to go to half speed. This will almost certainly be the longest battle I've done, provided the replay doesn't balk. Starling with his White Uruk Spearmongers, and over here the Wardens of Tir Gothrad and the Minas Tirith Spearmen. As a result of the Troll Drummers and all of these fear-causing Mordor units, this line has broken. So where initially it looked like the defenders were most solid, Froggy sent forward his elite units, Starling had a bit of support over here. Alisan's sacrifice was not in vain, because now the attackers are going to be able to wrap up a lot of the defensive lines. You can actually see over there, what is that? Oh, it's the corpses of the Angmar trolls. You can see it looks like victory is going to be had by the defenders over here, but ultimately at this point, the attackers are going to break through. Over here it looks like the defenders are not having the best time of it either. There's still some Wardens of Tir Gothrad, but they are shaken as well. They're pointing the wrong way. Yeah, there's not a lot of defenders left over here, and the Mountain Orc Berserkers are probably going to be the thing needed to break this line once and for all. So the attackers have managed to break through. Good play that by Froggy. I like the use of the Troll Drummers to break the battered and exhausted line which had been fighting for a long time. And now over here, Starling as well. Starling didn't commit all of his forces over here, which in the end turned out to be good for him. I mean, we'll see if the lack of Gundabad forces in the late game will prove to be a little bit of a problem. But these Snaga archers over here still firing in. But yeah, I feel sorry for Gundabad. They've taken such a beating, but again, it was quite necessary considering that Starling had some of his forces over here. Bobo's also got his Moranon archers in position now, which again, a bit of a skirmish for the attackers. Is going to force the defenders into full retreat over here. These Dunedain Rangers have got their swords out, but they're almost immediately going to be hunted down by what remains of the attackers over here. There's 5 orc fodder that are still alive. That's the power of the troll drummers. Even a lowly unit of fodder stays in the fight. It was a hideous fight over there as well for the attackers for a long time. They had to deal with a withering array of fire, but in the end, victory was theirs. And you can see now that with Bobo sending his Moranon infantry down there, the defenders are in retreat, so they're going to be retreating back to the hill position, back behind their encampment. These Melkors chosen, looks like they're going to get a nice charge off. On what, I'm not quite sure. Probably not the pikes. They don't want the pikes to turn around and kill them off quickly. Looks like they're going to get into the sharpshooters. Again, I'm pretty sure the sharpshooters are out of ammunition, so it's not like you'd be killing crossbowmen. But again, every little helps. The Melkors chosen really need to get away from the Karas Galadon's Guardians, though. The Megali Erin is still in relatively good shape, actually, which is interesting to see. And now you can see the Galathrim nobles. So Lothlorien still putting up a fight down here. They've got the Black Orcs of the mountains surrounded. But more orcs are coming forward. Moranon infantry from Bobo. Eventually, these Lothlorien units are going to be overwhelmed, so it's probably a good idea to start retreating at this point. There's the Lothlorien catapult, though, which has got an ideal position up on the hill. It was risky of outfit to do this, because obviously sometimes when you put artillery on the side of a hill like this in Medieval 2, it sort of falls off the hill in a really weird way. Or it sort of gets stuck to the side of the hill. But it looks like I've come just at the right time here to see the catapult fire in, although there's a lot of Lothlorien troops down there. He needs to be careful he doesn't get some friendly fire. Most of that hit the Black Orcs and routs them, so a very good hit there from the catapult. Despite the fact that the settlement is lost, the defenders are still making the attackers pay for it on the approach. The Witchrealm Blackguard are in there as well, so Gundabad have well and truly committed everything to taking this settlement. We shall see if Gundabad's allies can make that stick by also taking the hill. Sindar Blade Masters down there as the attackers move forward. What's going on over here? You can see these Wardens of Tir Gothrad. Looks like they're going to be caught by the Orc Archers. These Manatar Roman Guardians are coming forward, which is a unit I really want to save for the late game. Because again, they're not bad in melee, and they can really help shore up a line quite nicely. They are halberdiers in melee, I believe. Oh, well, that was artillery fire. So now the Manatar Roman Guardians are here, unless he would rather save the Wardens of Tir Gothrad. But that's an interesting decision to make. I would personally, in this situation, I'd probably go for the Manatar Roman Guardians, if only because the pike contingent is already being taken care of by Lothlorien, who have managed to save both of their Karas Galadon's Guardians, which is probably the most important thing they could have saved. But the cost of saving those Wardens of Tir Gothrad is these Manatar Roman Guardians have been thrown under the bus. Orc Maulers, Orc Archers, and well, it looks like the Megal Yaren are going to try and save them, but that's also going to sacrifice a unit of these Mirkwood infantry as the catapult slams into the Orcs in the field over there. But the Megal Yaren are going to be surrounded now by the White Orc Spearmongers, which will probably be enough to finish them off as well. So that's not great for the defenders. That's 2 units which they've lost in the retreat. And then again, I suppose it is a fighting retreat. You only save what's important. Starling's Goblin King Bodyguard is fighting against some Lothlorien axes and some Lothlorien blades, I think, and it looks like the Goblin King Bodyguard is going to be victorious. Actually, defeat seems almost certain for the defenders, apparently, but Lothlorien archers are going to come forward, and with that amount of them, that could be enough to finish off Starling's general, which is a bit of a catch for Lothlorien. Whether it's worth all of these men or not remains to be seen. But the Galathrim nobles and the Sindar archers are still down here. And they are going to be slowly but surely defeated as the Minas Morgul bodyguard. The catapult is starting to fire into the army of Bobo 16k. Who certainly has the healthiest army left of all the attackers. There's also some troll drummers, but Froggy's got a decent contingent left. Starling's still got a few units left. But Alasan and Master Blaster's armies have been pretty heftily damaged. Oh, don't want to get too close to that. Mountain Orc Berserkers are fighting. Against what, I wonder? Let's go and have a look over here. Lothlorien blades by the looks of things. Actually, no, Lothlorien spears. So yeah, there are scouts in here, which needless to say, scouts are not the finest melee force. But these Lothlorien units are pretty much isolated. Again, if I were the attackers, I would just try and swamp them and kill them off as efficiently as possible, so you've got more men for the late game. Although they're still going to have the numbers advantage, it remains to be seen how they're going to deal with the final defence. Because of course we know Mirkwood are the army that is left over there, and just having a look at things from the attacker's perspective, you can see that Lothlorien have essentially abandoned these units at this point. They're just sort of trying to blob the attackers up and get some nice catapult shots on them, I think. Just not a bad idea. But the Moranon archers are firing into those high-tier Lothlorien units. The Black Legion of Barad-dûr breaks through this alleyway at last, which was where Gundabad was so heavily damaged. Some troll drummers over there as well. But having a look at this defence, you can see over here there are a few ways in. This is obviously the most obvious way in, where the defenders have set up their front line of Hir-Eek and Karas Kaladhon's Guardians. And then you can see over there is a way through the encampment over there as well. But Mirkwood's army, a lot of it is made up of skirmishers. And that means I think the best way to go about this would probably be to just try and force your way through with the Black Legion of Barad-dûr and try and attack as quickly as possible, because trying to skirmish with Mirkwood is going to end very badly for most people. I mean, the Moranon archers are good, but at this point they don't have the volume of fire that Mirkwood have, nor the quality of fire that Mirkwood have. And I think that, well, they do have the Mountain Uruk archers, but ultimately I still don't think they have the volume or quality to deal with all of Mirkwood's skirmishers. So I think it would be a bit of a fool's errand to do that. Yes, skirmish with them, but attack at the same time. I think that would be the best thing for the attackers to do in this situation. You can see the Moranon archers are moving forward. At this point it's really just a case of clean up here against the Lothlorien troops. I have no idea why that is so bad. Again, I can only assume it's the corpses on the floor. There goes one of the Mordor generals by the looks of things. Looks like a foot-based one as well, so I assume that was Froggy's general. Because I think down here you can see the Minas Morgul bodyguard. Defeat is actually a certainty. We shall see how this goes. Another attacking general which may very well fall very quickly is Starling's Goblin King bodyguard, so the other version of Azog will also fall away. The Witch King is still alive though, so Gundabad's general is still intact. Bobo's general is still intact, and so is Starling's for the time being. Not for much longer, I would imagine, though. These Orc archers are going to be sent somewhere else, because they've finished dealing with the defenders who are trying to retreat over here. The White Uruk Fearmongers here are shaken. Probably in full view of the Mirkwood skirmishers, but they're still hidden. This is a scary front line, though. There's 3 Hir-Eek in total, and 2 Karas Kaladhon's Guardians, which the attackers are going to have to try and get through somehow. In addition to that, they've got a lot of Mirkwood skirmishers to hack their way through. There's still some Hir-Elang. I think the only real... Well, the Cardinal were able to save some battered Minas Girthlin units, but the only unit of genuine quality they saved were the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, which is not a bad unit to save. They've still got all of their ammunition, I think, and, of course, when they're out of ammo, multiple HP spears, again, will be able to be very good in the front line. Over here you can see the Moranon infantry. And that over there, pretty much the end of that fight, with the troll drummers in there. Let's go and have a look over here. Oh, just as I get there. There's the Witch King as well. The Witch King and Azog fighting side by side, but Azog unfortunately fell as soon as the Witch King arrived. But the Witch-Round Blackguard will be enough to kill that.
Without their general, they may lose heart and flee.
There goes the first of the defensive generals, though. Haldir dies. So, this is going to be it, and I think, based on the fact that I have seen this battle before, of course, there is going to be a lengthy skirmish phase, which I kind of don't agree with. I mean, we are more than halfway through the battle at this point, but I don't really agree with the fact that the attackers decided to try and skirmish with the enemy here, because I can see why they wanted to. I mean, trying to whittle down this front line is going to be quite important, but I feel as though the best thing to do would be to just kind of try and engage, shoot with your arrows, and then send a lot of your forces around the flank and then try and crush the line from the side. I think that would have been the smarter way to go about things and proceedings here, rather than a lengthy skirmish phase. Having said that, the attackers do still have a bit of an advantage here going into the late game, so they can afford to make more mistakes than the defenders. And the defenders, of course, they are pitting a lot of their hopes on the Mirkwood skirmishers here in the late game and whether they will be strong enough. Some of them are body piercing, so they should be able to do quite a lot of damage. But units like the Black Legion, the Sauron's Will, the Dismounted Temple Inquisitors, it remains to be seen whether or not victory will be theirs. And that's pretty much going to be the end over there. You can see there are some Sindar Blade Masters down there, but the Witchround Blackguard are also starting to move forward. We may as well see the last stand of the Sindar Blade Masters, and then there will be a little cut. Oh god, maybe not. Let's back into the fight. Seeing the last stand of these Sindar Blade Masters, and then there will be a little cut as the attackers begin their final assault on the hills that Merc would occupy. This is definitely a very well crafted scenario. I do like it. I just wish it wasn't as awkward to record as it appears to be. Again, there is a very real chance that I'm talking to no one and this will never see the light of day if it messes up the recording again. There goes the breaking of the Sindar Blade Masters. And so that is going to be it for the defenders. The settlement has ultimately fallen, and now the armies of Mordor, Gundabad and the Misty Mountains ready themselves for an assault on the final position. The encampment that the elves presumably set up to help Cardolan is the only thing that remains. And so I will see you when the attackers begin their final assault. So this was a rather odd strategy that I was seeing used. Bobo is trying to cycle charge with his archers and trying to confer a charge bonus by cycle charging your infantry in and out. It's not a bad idea by any means. But archers like this, needless to say, don't really have the highest charge bonus in the world. So they will probably be able to kill a couple of these spearmen as it goes forward. And also you can actually see that rather wily, Starling managed to get these Mountain Orc Berserkers just in through a little gap and is now attacking these Minas Tirith swordsmen. But unfortunately there aren't really enough of them to make this stick, so of course the Minas Tirith swordsmen will be able to finish up these Mountain Orc Berserkers, but every little helps again. They'll be able to kill a couple of these infantrymen going into the late game. But how sluggish this attack was actually surprised me a little bit. I was expecting the attackers to be a lot more proactive in this late game rather than trying to skirmish down. You can see over here there's some Mountain Orc archers. Like Alisand put his crossbows up here, but the crossbows were in full view of the Mirkwood skirmishers, so the Mirkwood skirmishers just ripped them apart, whereas I would have thought the better way to do it would be to engage with your infantry and then have your archers in the background, because if the skirmishers don't assist the infantry fight, then the infantry for the defenders is going to fall apart because they don't have as much of it, particularly if you sent forward something like the Black Legion of Barad-dûr. And then your skirmishers would be unchallenged and they'd be able to target what they will, you know, whittle down the enemy skirmish line, especially seeing as a lot of the Mirkwood skirmishers that still have ammunition are the more lightly armoured variants, like the Thurney Tower, wherever they may be, the Gwath E Erin Gallen, which are, to be fair, a knife thrower unit, but still relatively lightly armoured. Really the only heavily armoured skirmisher that you'd have to deal with would be the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, and they're probably one of the most low damage elite archers in the game, so that would have been how I would have done it. Having said that, they are trying to skirmish down, which is not necessarily the wrong thing to do either, simply because they do have a lot of skirmishers. They've got a lot of Morannon archers that they can simply send forward, and they also have the Mountain Uruk archers. With their 10 missile damage, they could yet be a deciding factor in this game. So, just a little side note there, there's also some more Morannon archers coming forward as the attack continues. And we are heading towards the final 10,000 frames of this battle, and this will undoubtedly be the longest battle that I've done in the new patch. Again, provided that the recording doesn't balk. Having a look back here, we've got some Hethel Tower getting into position. It looks as though they're actually being accosted in melee by the Mountain Orc Berserkers, although there's only one of them left. And the dual axes of the Hethel should be able to pretty easily deal with them. There's also a way around here that the attackers could use. And again, they do have the numbers to make advantage of this, but they need to move forward a little bit faster, in my opinion. Have a look up here, the Thurney Tower on the side of the hill with their body piercing, because the onus is on the attackers ultimately to attack. The defenders are not going to come to you. I mean, even if you don't like the idea of going into the body piercing archers of Mirkwood, it's really not your choice. You have to move forward. You are the orcs, you are attacking, and you need to raise the enemy armies to the ground for your Dark Master. But having a look at this, this was a very strange change of pace, considering how eager the attackers were to get stuck into the settlement defence, and now over here they're a little bit more reluctant to move in. But we shall see. And again, I think I will actually make another little cut, because it is going to be a little while before the attackers move forward. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that it was interesting to see cycle charging with infantry, because it is often something which people don't have the time to micro in a faster battle. And it's not something you'll see often at all when it comes to the archers, who of course don't have a big charge bonus, but it was something interesting to highlight anyway. Just another little excursion. The attackers are really engaging somewhat piecemeal, which is kind of strange considering their numbers advantage, but you can see now that the attack is starting to get underway more fully. The Witch Realm Blackguard, led by the Witch King, decided to go on a bit of a suicide run to try and kill the Thurney Tower up on the hill, but they were immediately intercepted by some Hir-E Peng and now some Hir-E Lung. There are these Orc Javelins down here which are able to get some volleys into the back of the Hir-E Peng, but it looks like they're going to be pursued rather quickly. And you can see the Moran infantry are coming up the hill, and this is the more attractive avenue of attack because it means you don't have to go through the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians and the Hir-E Ek, I should say, not Hir-E Peng. You can see here the Thurney Tower up on the hill with their body-piercing arrows. I believe they have body-piercing arrows anyway. I might be wrong about that. It might just be the Delu Peng. But having said that, the Hir-E Lang are also coming in. The body-piercing, if it is present, is going to rip through the Moran infantry. You can see here the Orc Javelins, which still have some ammunition aside and getting behind, but it looks like the Witch King is going to fall any second now, because it is only him over here with his giant mace. But he's about to be killed by Thranduil's men. And there he goes. And that's Gundabad dealt with. So one Gundabad, well, Gundabad and one of the Misty Mountains armies are largely dealt with at this point. But you can see here that there's only really one unit of Hir-E Lang over here. The Hethel-E Tower, with their dual axes getting into the fight, fighting alongside the Minas Tirith swordsman from Cardland. But here comes, in my opinion, the unit which the defenders should be most concerned about, the Black Legion of Barad-dûr, because this is a thin line that the Black Legion could very well start to exploit quite effectively. You can see the Hir-E Peng are also going to be getting into these Moran infantry over here. Interestingly, they haven't decided to fully engage over here yet, and this is actually leading to the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians leaving this defence, because I think they realise that there isn't going to be much that the, well, these Minas Morgul Chosen could be enough to push through the line, but they'll take a huge amount of damage from the Hir-E Ek, who are overall, I think, slightly superior in terms of stats, but the Minas Morgul Chosen might be multiple HP. Bobo immediately shifting his focus with one of his units of Black Legion to go the other way. But the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians are going to be helping to deal with these units up on the hill, and immediately, as a result of the body-piercing arrows, Mordor are starting to run out of troops over here. The Black Legion are starting to push their way through the Hethel-E Tower, but they're going to be taking damage all the time they're doing that. The Mountain Uruk archers, though, 10 missile damage and fire ammunition being poured into the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians. That might very well be enough to defeat them in the long run. As you can see here, the Lothlorien pikes taking a withering amount of arrow fire. Minas Morgul bodyguard being sent forward from Bobo as well, a multiple HP infantry unit. All of these orcs are going to be staying in the fight for a lot longer than they would as well, with these troll drummers. And here you can see that the orcs are being able to force their way through. The Black Legion proving its worth in melee alongside the Minas Morgul Chosen, so definitely a very heavy duty infantry line. But another Cardland unit that was saved from the earlier game was a unit of Dunedain Captains, slightly battered but still going to be able to do some damage. And up here on the hill you can see the Delu Peng, which I believe certainly are body piercing. I'd be very surprised if they weren't. And they've got a nice shot into the back of those Black Legion, and defeat does seem certain for them. They're even shaken despite the presence of the troll drummers. So this is it, all or nothing for the attackers. The Gwath are also here with their throwing knives. And over here you can also see that the Nunwaith units, the Argwei Nunwaith, are going to be able to get a nice firing position into here as well. They're not body piercing, but the amount of missile damage they have is very formidable indeed. And now you can see over here the attackers just sending forward everything they have, trying to break the back of the defensive line. And here you can see the Hir-E Lang. The Thurney Tower up on the hill still fighting, but now you can see the dismounted Temple Inquisitors are moving forward. And with this weight of numbers, the Hir-E Lang and the Hir-E Peng may very well start to struggle a little bit. There's also some Sauron's Will down there from Bobo.
They have lost half their men.
It is primarily Bobo's army that is left. I'm not quite sure why those started to judder there in terms of frame rate, but Starling's archers could yet be the thing which turned this battle around. You can see that it is still very close. It's within 10%, and the attackers are pulling it back all the time, despite the fact that they are taking horrendous losses doing this. It is actually, believe it or not, a bit more cost effective for the attackers, this, because the defenders have got so little in the way of men left. Because Mirkwood are really the primary force that are remaining, and of course elves don't have the highest amount of men per unit, as the trolls continue to bang their drums, inspire their men, But is it going to be enough as we approach the closing stages of this battle? It's a very close fight, this. A very well-balanced scenario. I mean, that is a huge mass of orcs over there. And then the Gwath are in here. Ooh. That frame rate, though. The Gwath do have throwing knives. I'm not sure if the projectiles are armor-piercing on these guys. I know they are on the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen because they use Nafatoon-style bombs. But on the Gwath, I'm not so sure. As they fire their payload into the huge writhing mass of orcs. I do like playing as Mirkwood, and they are going to be slightly buffed in the hotfix because they are very difficult to play at the moment. At least in a 1v1 setting, it's very difficult to make the most of them. And now over here you can see that the Nanwaith units are coming in. If there is a unit on the field which can go one-to-one with the Temple Inquisitors, it's these guys, the Arthalion e Nanwaith, formerly known as the Elder Palace Guard. They aren't quite the world beaters that they used to be. They and the Temple Inquisitors have been sort of reined in a little bit, but they are still an extremely powerful unit. They've also got a few new animations as well to better befit their weaponry. Thranduil's finest getting stuck in, cleaving their way through these orcs. There are still some White Uruk Fearmongers here on the front line, which is impressive to still see them. The Hearthguard of Amon Sul are now out of ammunition, but they are multiple HP spears in melee, so they are coming forward. And they could very well be the centre of this defence now, because they are a very tough unit to break down. There are some Blackback Berserkers somewhere around here. Ooh, the Arguay Nanwaith. And here are the Blackback Mountain Berserkers. They're being sent against the Spears and the Dunedain Captains over here. And it will take them quite a while, particularly when they're under archer fire like this, but the Blackback Berserkers should be able to break through this line over here. The Hir-Eek and the Dunedain Captains will not be sufficient to beat a unit of Blackback Berserkers, but it's elsewhere where I would worry for the attackers. Up here on the hill, primarily. They've still got some Black Legion of Barad-dûr, and they were able to push their way through the lines, but as soon as the bulldozer work is done, the Black Legion are a little bit lackluster in melee, and they do need to be backed up quite swiftly. And they are being focused down by these Hir-Eek, who, despite being archers, of course, they are higher tier elven archers, so they will perform quite well in melee.
Only half our force remains.
Indeed. We go back up to 1 speed. You can see there are some heavy maulers in here. The armor-piercing damage will be very useful against something like these Minas-Girithlan archers, who, unlike the elven archers, really the only thing they have going for themselves in melee is the fact they are pretty tough. But the heavy maulers should be able to do a decent amount of damage to them. And we can see over here the Thurney Tower are actually being attacked in melee by Morannon archers. I think the Thurney Tower are actually out of ammunition at this point. Again, they are elves, so they do have a pretty decent amount of skill. They're not quite as good as the Hir-Eek in melee, mind you. There's another unit of healthy Blackback Berserkers coming around the side, however, which is probably not the sort of thing the defenders wanted to see. Because a unit of Blackback Berserkers rolling up this line over here, ripping through the Hir-Eek is the sort of thing which could very quickly start to disintegrate this defence, because it is a very thin line of defenders, and if it doesn't hold, the defenders could very well find their elite units starting to get overwhelmed and surrounded, particularly now that they're starting to run a little bit lower on ammunition. And perhaps rather tellingly, the Mountain Uruk archers will still have their ammunition, so the attackers could well pull this out yet. As we can see that the percentages are still starting to close, but I'm not sure if the attackers left it too late, I wonder. There's only 5% of them remaining, whereas there's 12% of the defenders. But it could be enough. These Blackback Berserkers are going to be able to get into these Thurney Tower. But I think the one unit of Mirkwood skirmishers, well, they do have 2 units of skirmishers which still have ammunition, one of which is the Delupeng, the other of which is the Nanwaith. And they could be the match winners as well. There's a lot of possibilities here going into the late game. The Blackback Berserkers, it says defeat seem certain, but that's only because all of the unit hasn't engaged yet. As soon as all of them get into the Thurney Tower, they will start to rip through them pretty quickly. But the Delupeng are starting to fire into the blob. Ooh, I don't know what's causing the lag there. It might be the Troll Drummers, actually, which would be strange, but the Sauron's Will managed to break right through the middle of this skirmish line, and they might be able to get into the Gwath here, although there's not enough of them left to defeat the Gwath in melee, I don't think. The Sauron's Will, after all, are a AP focused unit, and assassins like the Gwath are certainly not armor piercing, although they turn their back to the Sauron's Will and allow the Sauron's Will to get their charge off, which is a little bit of a mistake there. Will they live to regret that? Meanwhile, if we have a look over here, we can see the Clash of the Titans, the IR Athalion e Nanwaith. It's that first word which is the worst. Against the dismounted Temple Inquisitors. 2 colossi of the battlefield, meeting head to head. But I think the Nanwaith are going to have the victory here because the Temple Inquisitors don't have anything to back them up, whereas the Nanwaith do, even if it is only battered here Elang. And they also have the Gwath over there. The Sauron's Will actually pushing all the way through to the Delupang. Those Blackback Mountain Berserkers are starting to take fire from the Argway Nanwaith. What's going on over here? You can see that there are still some Hir Elang and Hir Eak which are shifting their focus. I think that's Lothlorien, so Lothlorien's army has been utterly destroyed. But I think Mirkwood are going to have enough. These Blackback Berserkers, they will win over here eventually, but they're not going to be able to win quickly enough. I mean, it's really going to come down to the archers at this point, the Mountain-Uruk archers of Starling. They could yet turn this fight around, but it's going to take an awful lot, I think. You can see here that the Hearthguard of Amon Sul are just tanking their way through the lines. They started off over here, they tanked their way through all of the Mordor infantry, and they are now getting in behind the lines of Mordor, getting into the rear of these Morannon heavy maulers, helping out these Thurny Tower. There's still these Blackback Berserkers over here, but I think the Argway Nanwaith still have some ammunition left, and that will ultimately be enough, I think, to defeat them. The Troll Drummers are being committed to melee. They might be able to do a decent amount of damage to the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, but you can see even with the Troll Drummers, the Mordor Orcs are just losing taste for the fight entirely. What's going on over here? Yeah, a lot of routing. The Minas Morgul bodyguard is also being attacked by Hir Elang, Hir Eek, and now the Gwath are getting into melee as well. The Gwath with their dual daggers. Again, assassins are definitely the sort of unit, and in particular with Mirkwood, with how many hidden units you have, you could make very good use of assassins like this. Mirkwood are definitely a faction which loves an ambush. And over here you can see the Nanwaith firing into the Mountain-Uruk archers, trying to focus them down, because at this point the Mountain-Uruk archers are really the only threat to the defenders that could yet turn this fight around. Because the attackers are still pulling this back. I mean, every time we look at the percentages it starts to get a little bit closer, but I think it's just a little bit too late. They only have 2% of their forces remaining, whereas the defenders have 6. They still have some Delupang? Delupang might be out of ammunition, indeed they are. They're getting into melee, trying to overwhelm the Blackback Mountain Berserkers. Don't know what's causing the lag as we go over here. I don't think it's the bodies, I think it is actually the Troll Drummers. I really hope this recording is stuck. I'll be so upset if it hasn't.
The fortune of battle goes our way. Let's pray it remains as such.
And here we can see that now the announcer is starting to suggest that the defenders have got the better of this fight, and I would agree. These Blackback Berserkers are slowly but surely wearing down these Hir Eek, but not nearly fast enough, because it is over here where the defenders are starting to win. These Hearthguard of Amon Sul have started to take quite a lot of damage, but they've really been champions in the late game. With their survivability, they've really helped tie the Mirkwood forces together. Mirkwood skirmishes in the end, it looks like they are going to be worth it. The Troll Drummers are going to be slowly but surely worked down Thurny Tower, and it's just a case of how long will the Trolls last in melee, because as soon as their encouragement abandons the attackers, I can't help but feel as though that will be the end of the fight, and it'll just be a matter of trying to chase down Starling's archers. There goes another Troll. There are only 4 Blackback Mountain Berserkers left alive. Mirkwood proving that skill and quality sometimes trump outright numbers. Still, those archers are firing in though, doing a lot of damage with their fire arrows, but I mean, it's possible Starling could kite them to death, but that would leave him very, very unpopular, I can't help but feel. As the Argway Nanwaith as well, the Elder Royal Council, Thranduil still lives, and the King of Cardland still lives. I don't know what the name of the King of Cardland for this time period would have been. Not that Cardland was much of a kingdom in the Third Age, to be fair. Arnor was very much a mess. Hearthguard of Amon Sul coming to the aid of the Hir Eek, trying to finish off these Blackback Mountain Berserkers. Hearthguard of Amon Sul, I think actually they will actually be taking a slight nerf in the hotfix. I think their shield value will be decreased a little bit. But even with that, they'll still be the tankiest of all the archer units, so it doesn't really make too much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. And the devs do know what they are doing. Gameplay-wise, this patch is such an improvement. Argway Nanwaith, the Gwath Egalan are also going to be throwing their throwing knives into these Blackback Berserkers to finish them off as we enter the final 2,000 frames of this battle. it is becoming obvious that the defenders once again will win Ironwood. When I covered Ironwood in 0.91 they won, but that was mainly by using Mirkwood and how strong they were in 0.91 as a crutch, whereas this time I feel as though it's a much better balanced scenario. The attackers have also lost a lot of what made them potent in 0.91 to be fair as well. The ability to simply push through defences is no longer there. And now you can see the Mountain Uruk archers are going to be caught in melee. These units are shaken, to be fair. There's still a troll drummer left alive back over there. I mean, he will be brought down eventually, but even so, with point blank fire arrows, grilling those elves. One of the attacking armies is gone. That might even be Bobo's army, to be fair, so Starling is going to be the last of the attackers left standing. The Misty Mountains standing firm till the end. Valor amongst goblins, but ultimately I think we can bump this up to ×2 speed, because it's really just a matter of hunting down these archers at this point. And the Agwe Inanwaith will be able to do that relatively easily. Those Mountain Uruk archers are routing over there. These ones over here are shaken. These Hearthguard of Amon Sul, I mean, if they're going to recharge the Mountain Uruk archers, it will break them because they are shaken. They may be very strong in terms of missile damage, but in a melee they aren't going to be able to beat elite elves, needless to say. And there they go, routing off. They're not actually the last ones to fall. It is the Blackback Berserkers. Those Sindar Blade Masters still routing all over the place. Lothlorien, of course, exited stage right in this fight a little while ago. But yeah, the Blackback Berserkers, unsurprising maybe that they're the last ones left standing. They don't give up easily. But the Gwath and the Hir Ek will be enough to defeat them. And there we go. Carnage littering this settlement. It's not really fit for purpose anymore. A lot of the buildings are a little bit wrecked. Also, the orcs moving through stuff like the inn. I imagine it's not going to be too pretty inside there anymore. But victory was for the defenders.
We have won here today.
Thranduil in his finest, managing to eke out a victory. And over here we can have a look at the stats and kills. Now, I think this Mordor army was probably Bobo's, judging on the fact that there were less men and he had more men. Well, he had more men of quality in his army than Froggy was afforded. Gundabad getting the least amount of kills, but again, they were really the first ones in. They bore the brunt of a lot of the defenders' power, as did Alisan, to be fair, with these 951 kills. Starling getting a decent amount of kills with his Mountain Uruk archers. I would imagine for the attackers of a single unit, those Mountain Uruk archers probably got the most kills. But Bobo doing a good job again, forcing his way through with the Melkor's Chosen, helping to facilitate a breakthrough with Froggy. But for the defenders, Mirkwood getting the least kills, unsurprising considering they were the ones which waited to the late game, which again meant they were going to be facing more of the elite troops rather than the fodder. The opposite to Cardlin over here, who of course the majority of their troops that they would have been fighting were fodder. I know for a fact that the Dunedain Rangers got close to 2,000 kills, but again that was necessary because if they didn't get that amount of kills, the attackers would simply have overwhelmed them. I think the Rangers will be getting a bit of an ammo reduction, so they won't be getting quite that many kills, but they would still be getting in excess of 1,000 kills. But against lower tier orcs, that is intended, because of course it makes it a little bit better for the defenders to try and deal with those numbers. And Lothlorien slotting in quite nicely in between the two here, because they were a pretty big part of the outer defence, but they were a little bit more of a factor later on, especially in the rearguard action where many Lothlorien elves valiantly laid down their lives for the retreat, including Haldir. So yeah, I hope that you will see this battle because it is very much a battle worth showing. Very close. It was 100% to 97% in the end. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, should it come out, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.